Hello, good evening. Welcome to ITV News and Wednesday night's calendar.
Here are tonight's main stories.
In the face of enormous challenges, I report today on a British economy which is proving the doubters wrong.
After a biting cost of living crisis, the Chancellor said the British economy was back on track. So how did his message go down in a town where hundreds are losing their jobs?
My husband's a veteran, army veteran, and we had to apply to the British Legion for help towards our gas and electricity bills.
It's really hard. I'm having to cut back on, some foods that I'd normally get because I can't afford to get them because of the electric and that.
Also tonight, caught in the act, the video evidence which helped catch and convict Sumaya Begum's murderer.
It's a despicable act by Khan. Throughout the interviews and throughout the trial process, he has never provided an account for his actions or enabled us to establish a motive for the killing of Sumaya.
Taking the plunge, the Sheffield swimmer who's using her own struggles to help others keep afloat.
And we have liftoff. Yorkshire Air Ambulance unveils the latest addition to its fleet, and we get a trip on board. Good evening. First, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt today declared that the UK economy was back on track and will avoid a recession this year. In his budget, he pledged support with childcare, help with energy bills and changes to pensions.
But in stark contrast, the Office for Budget Responsibility says that over the next 2 years, living standards are expected to see their biggest fall since records began in the 1950s.
John Hill has spent the day getting reaction to the Chancellor's speech in Scunthorpe, where 260 job losses were recently announced in the town's steel industry.
It's a town whose history and reputation is built on steel. But these are uncertain times. 260 jobs are to go at the steelworks, and locals here, as elsewhere, are having to budget, just like the Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, in the face of enormous challenges, I report today on a British economy which is proving the doubters wrong.
As Jeremy Hunt got to his feet in Parliament, over at Macy's Cafe near Scunthorpe Steelworks, they were doing their own maths. Wholesale pork and eggs have gone up by a third, tinned tomatoes doubled in price. For customers Rachel and Andy, this might be their only meal today.
My husband's a veteran, army veteran, and we had to apply to the British Legion for help towards our gas and electricity bills because we're paying nearly £300 a month, and it's due to go up again. We just don't have that kind of money.
Cafe delivery driver Dave feels the same.
It's really hard. I'm having to cut back on, some foods that I'd normally get because I can't afford to get them because of the electric and that.
This means the £2,500 cap for the typical household will remain in place when energy prices remain high.
The Chancellor did extend the energy price cap for another 3 months, limiting average bills at £2,500 a year. Back in Scunthorpe, there's a welcome for his move to introduce 30 hours a week free childcare for 1 and 2 year olds. At Cheeky Chimp's Play Centre, little Nancy is blissfully unaware of the cost of living, but the policy gets a thumbs up from her grandmother Carol.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah, because we have Nancy on a Wednesday, but Monday and a Thursday my son has to put her in childcare, and it's quite a lot of money. A week to come out of your wages.
The prices of electricity for us is just absolutely scandalous. The gas is on, which is scandalous, to heat a massive building up. You start putting prices up, then people don't want to come in because it's too expensive, which you understand. Food's going up, so then you put your food up. Again, people are complaining. So going forward, I don't know how long you can actually keep going without putting your prices up.
In the town centre, shuttered-up shops perhaps tell their own economic story. The budget may have eased the burden for some, but for others, the cost of living remains a heavy load.
John Hill with that report from Scunthorpe, and he's been getting more reaction to that budget, which the Chancellor claimed was proving the doubters wrong.
Well, if the Chancellor does want to prove the doubters wrong, he also perhaps needs to persuade those who create prosperity, perhaps small businesses like one we're in now. This is Scunthorpe Sheet Metal Fabrication Workshop, old school if you like. Nick's in the background just doing some welding on a steel table. It's been here 13 years, this business, and the boss is Eric Deaton. Now Eric, we actually spoke to you a few weeks ago when that sad news really about the job losses at the steelworks, which are just across the way. For you as a small business today, what did you take from the budget?
Not a lot, but because small businesses, you want growth, you want to experience some profitability, and then corporation tax going up from 19% to 25%, it's a big jump, and as a small business you don't make a fortune, but you want to be able to see something at the end of your working week, and I don't think there is. And
that's something he could have changed today in your view then?
He could have, if he wants the country to have growth and for foreign businesses to invest in our country. And they've already said that they're starting to not invest, they're moving to other countries. It's like Dyson, or they're building their factories in Ireland. There was one just lost. So yeah, he could have done something, but
it didn't do. For you, what does Scunthorpe feel like? You told me earlier that you've ticked along for the last 13 years, you're busy, but what does the town feel like?
Well, I'm not really sure, to be exactly sure, because at the moment I don't notice a lot of change, but obviously people on the works, we've just lost 300 jobs and that's the streamlining and everything. They ain't got this loan and everything what they want. So it's not doom and gloom, but it is, on the down slightly. You know what I mean?
Eric, we wish you well and thank you for your time. And I know you're busy.
No probs.
With the budget, they always say, don't they, the devil is in the detail. So it may be that the devil and the detail come in the days to come.
John Hill reporting there.
OK, so that's the view in Scunthorpe. Let's take a look now at some of the Chancellor's key announcements which could affect you in a bit more detail. A lot rides on childcare. Parents of children over 9 months will be entitled to claim 30 hours a week, but it will be rolled out in stages over the next few years.
Those on universal credit will get more towards the cost of their childcare, and it will be paid up front. There'll also be investment in more wraparound care for school-aged children.
A new voluntary scheme will help those with disabilities find work if they want to, up to £4,000 per person. Workers will now be able to put up to £60,000 a year into their private pension pots before paying tax. And the limit to what can be saved in their lifetime before tax is being abolished altogether.
Back at home, households will continue to benefit from the energy price guarantee, extended for the next 3 months, capping average bills at £2,500 a year. Charges will also be brought down for those on prepayment meters, in line with those on direct debits.
£63 million is to be invested in leisure centres, and there'll be a £100 million for charities and community organisations. Finally, at the pumps, fuel duty's been frozen for a year, and at the other pumps, those in pubs, the government's addressing the duty on draft products, freezing the cost of a pint. Well, Katie Oscroft has been following the day's events from Westminster and getting reaction from some of our region's MPs.
Well, this is their bedtime reading tonight, 114 pages, and many MPs left saying, I need to see the detail. Well, if you get as far as page 71, you find there is a share of some £400 million of levelling up money for 20 areas, including Doncaster, Mansfield, Wakefield and Bassetlaw. No idea yet, though, as to how that comes about or exactly what that's for. There are some specifics, though. £5.6 million for regeneration to Kirklees. They're planning to spend that on a former textile mill in Marsden, £20 million for regeneration in Rotherham. Now, our Labour MPs are concentrating on what's missing from here, whereas the Conservatives are saying, well, the Chancellor has been listening.
There was nothing about training more doctors, training more nurses, training more teachers. Support for our public services, I think, was very, very lacking. And when you think about the reality of most people's lives in Batley and Spen, my constituency, and elsewhere across the country, those are some of the really pressing issues. Our public services are in a really bad way.
I think the most important thing is that it's really addressed a lot of the concerns that have been building up, whether that be around health clinicians' pension funds, whether it be around childcare issues, whether it be around business businesses worried about how they're going to be able to invest in their companies. I think this budget's really listened to all of those concerns and has tried to address them.
Now, also in here, something we heard a bit about yesterday, there's £80 million each for 12 Canary Wharf-style investment zones, and West and South Yorkshire mayoral authorities are on a short list for that. But again, no more detail on that today. Labour is saying this is not a budget for growth and that the Conservatives are simply repairing their own mistakes. The Conservatives, though, point to childcare, help with energy costs, that help with swimming pools to stay open, and say that there really is something in here for everyone.
OK, Katie Oscroft at Westminster, thank you.
Well, let's move on to the rest of the day's news now. And an uncle who murdered his niece and dumped her body like rubbish on wasteland in Bradford has been jailed for life with a minimum sentence of 25 years.
Samaya Begum was killed by Mohammed Tarus Khan in a violent attack in June last year after she'd refused to be forced into marriage.
There's now to be an investigation into how authorities handled the case after Samaya became the subject of an order to protect her from forced marriage. Michael Billington has been following the case at Bradford Crown Court.
Soon after murdering his niece, Mohammed Tarus Khan begins his failed attempt to disguise her death. Driving Samaya's body to a shipping container, he stores it there overnight. The following evening, he's seen parking at Wasteland in Fitzwilliam Street, not far from Samaya's home, removing a large, heavy object from the boot of his car. This was the moment he dumped her body, wrapped in a carpet. She was found 11 days after going missing.
It's a despicable act by Khan. Having murdered his niece, then go on to try and cover his tracks. It can only be described as beyond belief. Khan has never provided any account. Throughout the interviews and throughout the trial process, he has never provided an account for his actions or enabled us to establish a motive for the killing of Samaya.
Samaya was described as a bright, vibrant young woman. She spent her final moments on Saturday, the 26th of June last year, talking on her phone to friends and family. It fell silent at 3:30 that afternoon, not long after Khan made one of several visits to her home that day. But Khan should never have been there, under a restraining order after threatening his daughter with a knife. Samaya was stabbed in the back with a metal spike, and although a pathologist was unable to say exactly how she was killed, they also couldn't rule out strangulation. Her murder has now prompted questions about whether she was failed by authorities. The subject of a forced marriage protection order after refusing to marry her cousin in Pakistan in 2019, she should have been safe from any repercussions.
This was a preventable death. It didn't need to happen, and I think there are valuable lessons that we can take away from this to prevent future deaths such as this. She was on the radar of statutory professionals that had a duty to safeguard and protect her, and we're here today on the sentencing hearing of her uncle. So to me, there have clearly been some failures where she hasn't been protected, and it is that needs to be reviewed.
We had the Samia Shahid murder. That was an honour killing. We had Shafilia Ahmed, who had links to Bradford. We have Samaya now, who has lost her life. You know, and there has to be conversations. And for young people, my message is really, really clear. You have an absolute right to live free of fear. Girls, boys, all of them.
A domestic homicide review into the case will now be carried out. As for Khan, he's tonight beginning at least 25 years in jail for the murder of a young woman who the judge said he'd simply left to rot. Michael Billington, ITV News at Bradford Crown Court.
You're watching Wednesday night's calendar, and still to come on the programme.
The real whacker, and Jerry Colomb, the real whacker. I think has held off Jerry Colomb.
In sport, Bayern knows Yorkshire's the real whacker, who we featured on last night's programme, gets his fairy tale win at Cheltenham. We have the reaction shortly.
And as temperatures dipped down to minus 9.1 in Ravensworth last night, what else will our weather story bring us as we head towards the weekend? Join me later and I'll let you know.
But first, a police detention officer who worked at Huddersfield Police Station has been convicted of a terror offence after posts on social media. 26-year-old William Lloyd Hughes of Crossland Moor in Huddersfield pleaded guilty to publishing an image of 2 flags in September last year. He's said to have given reasonable suspicion that he was a member of a banned terror group. Lloyd Hughes was released on unconditional bail at Westminster Magistrates Court and is currently suspended by West Yorkshire Police.
A 15-year-old boy has pleaded guilty to the murder of Kyrie McLean outside his school in Huddersfield last year. The teenager, who can't be named for legal reasons, was due to stand trial at Leeds Crown Court today alongside his 17-year-old co-defendant. His co-accused denies murder and will proceed to trial. Kyrie, who was injured outside North Huddersfield Trust School in September last year, was rushed to hospital but died from his injuries.
Journalists at the BBC in Leeds, Sheffield and York are staging 24 hours of strike action after the broadcaster proposed cuts to local services. Members of the National Union of Journalists walked out at 11 a.m. Changes would see local radio programming restricted and programmes shared between stations. Some Look North TV programmes have been removed from today's BBC One schedules. A BBC spokesman said the broadcaster had tried to minimise disruption as much as possible.
Time for sport now, and a big Yorkshire winner at the Cheltenham Festival.
Zero Accounting Software sponsors ITV Regional Sports Report.
Now, if you were watching yesterday, you'll have seen our report on Leyburn-based horse, the Real Whacker. Well, today he romped home to victory, as we of course knew he would, in the novices' chase at the world-famous Cheltenham Festival. Whacker led the race from the very start, but was almost pipped to the post right at the end. Thankfully, he wasn't, and racked up a massive win for trainer Patrick Neville, who runs a small stable of around 20 horses in Leyburn in North Yorkshire.
Unbelievable. Sure, magic feeling. Super horse. Sure, his jumping is unbelievable, you know. I had him in the Gold Cup and they said I was mad, but sure.
And listen, your big decision to move to England, what prompted that? Could you imagine that this is how it would have gone?
I couldn't get owners in Ireland, so it was more or less either give up or stay going, you know.
Well, sadly, there weren't any winners for our region's football teams last night. Rotherham fell behind at home to Preston, but did equalise through Hakeem Adofin. However, former Sheffield United striker Ched Evans struck in the second half to leave them looking nervously at the Championship relegation zone. Meanwhile, Mansfield missed out on the chance to move into the League Two playoff spots after losing at Northampton. The ITV Evening News continues with more on that budget at 6:30. Here's Geraint Vincent.
On the programme tonight, Jeremy Hunt's plan to boost the economy. The Chancellor unveiled his budget today, pledging to make the UK one of the most prosperous countries in the world. We'll have reaction and analysis, and we'll be answering your questions on what the changes mean for you. On a day when hundreds of thousands of workers went on strike in what could be the biggest walkout so far this year. Join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
We will indeed. Thank you very much. Now, it's well known that exercise and keeping active is good for your mental health, but even some of the fittest athletes can sometimes struggle.
Sheffield-based swimmer Amber Keegan is an Olympic hopeful but has struggled with illness, depression and injury.
She decided to set up a support service for female athletes experiencing difficulties in their lives. Dan Salisbury-Jones went to meet her.
When Amber Keegan darts through water, for her, the muffled sounds are a source of comfort. But she says chasing her dreams in this sport also contributed to illness and depression. An eating disorder so severe, the most simple task became dangerous.
Walking around is something that any kind of healthy, non-ill, able-bodied person would expect themselves to be able to do. And I gave myself a bone injury from doing that. And I'm a fit individual, I'm an athlete. And that's quite terrifying me, that I could hurt myself so much by just walking around because of how little fuel I had, because of how little I was feeding myself. And it terrifies me to think where I would have been if my nutritionist hadn't stepped in.
I noticed the photos that you sent me from that time. You're smiling in all of them.
You're depressed, you often don't walk around with a sticky note on your forehead saying, I have depression. Like, you try and hide these things, you try and bury them, and there aren't any photos of me having a really rubbish time because I wasn't showing anyone that side of me when it was happening, and I think that's something a lot of us can relate to.
Her passion is now shared between training healthily and helping the next generation of female athletes.
You get kind of bombarded with this messaging from being quite young that athletes should be skinny, athletes should be careful about what they eat. And I think especially as women and young girls, when you're parading around in a swimming costume, as you're hearing those messages, you really internalise it. And I hadn't realised quite how much I'd internalised the messaging that skinny was good.
It's those experiences that led to her creating the women's support group Athlete Interactions.
We are here as peers to speak to other kind of athletes, other women in sport who are going through a tough time, whether that's aspiring athletes, current athletes or retired athletes as well.
Why do you think this is needed? Because it's been something that has been highlighted time and time again to elite sport.
Yeah, so one thing that some of the athletes reaching out to us have said they found is even where governing bodies have actually provided kind of psychologists or psychiatrists for them to talk to, there's been kind of hesitation and fears by some of those athletes to reach out because they're not sure, oh, what if this affects my selection? What if this affects what the people who want to fund me think about me? And kind of that's a kind of very real reason why people don't access the support that might be available to them. But for us, we're just an athlete to chat to. There's no reason why people should feel they can't reach out to us.
Amber, like many of those she's trying to help, is striving to qualify for the Paris Olympics. But Olympian or not, she's already building a lasting legacy.
And we wish her all the very best. And if you've been affected by any of the issues mentioned in that report, you can find help and support on our website. Just log on to itv.com/calendar.
Now, it's been a feature in our skies for more than 2 decades, and tonight, Calendar's cameras have been given a first look at a brand new aircraft which will be used by doctors and paramedics at the Yorkshire Air Ambulance.
2 new 5-prop helicopters are replacing the older choppers which are being phased out.
Well, our reporter Matt Price has been aboard one of them, speaking to those who'll be treating patients and flying each day.
They are credited with saving hundreds of lives each year. This is the latest tool in their armoury, a brand new state-of-the-art helicopter for Yorkshire Air Ambulance.
The first thing you'll notice is this one has 5 rotor blades, and that actually makes the aircraft a lot smoother than its predecessor. It's also a little bit lighter because there's no anti-vibration system on the aircraft, which allows us to fly with another half an hour's worth of fuel, so we can go further and stay airborne for much longer.
And it's now available for use by the doctor.
Loaded with life-saving gear, packed with the very latest trauma kit, the Airbus D3 is used by military, police and air rescue services right around the world. Capable of flying at night time, it has huge advances in technology, the very best in pre-hospital care. Sammy, who's been with the service for 20 years, knows just how important that is.
For me, as a paramedic, the first thing that stands out is the new stretcher. The stretcher just keeps us self-sufficient. We don't have to wait now for a trolley to be brought to the aircraft. We can just wheel, unclick and go straight into the emergency department.
Yorkshire Air Ambulance deals with the most complex and critical emergencies. Even during our filming, a shout came in involving new recruit Loz.
You know what you're going to?
Not yet, no.
What goes through your mind?
I'm going through my mind, it's my first job, so,
okay.
So this one's going to be my first job.
The team here are used to dealing with cardiac arrest to severe head injuries, where time is of the essence.
Obviously the road crews do an amazing job with what they've got on their vehicles, but they are limited, just like we're limited. But obviously what we can do is we can bring a little bit more expertise in certain areas, particularly trauma and that sort of thing, and the specialist kit that we need to the areas which would in effect probably take about a good 45 minutes to an hour sometimes to get an ambulance response.
It costs £19,000 a day to keep the air ambulance flying. Donations from the public have helped to secure an improved aircraft, which will ensure improved patient care. Matt Price, ITV News.
It's
really
an expensive
fantastic
bit of kit, but very valuable.
Well, worth it, you know, because I had a relative who lived up in the Dales in a very remote place who had a cardiac arrest, and the air ambulance went out to them and managed to get them to hospital in Middlesbrough in a matter of, well, just maybe half an hour, something like that.
It shows how really valuable it is to all the rural communities and throughout Yorkshire. So good work from them fundraising for that new helicopter. Now here's Des Coleman with the weather.
Good visibility on the horizon. TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Hi, good to see you. When it comes down to our weather story, let's find out exactly what's happening. After a very wonderful start this morning, actually, lots in the way of blue sky, a bit of a frosty start. It really did cloud over. This picture really shows that cloud sweeping over. It's been sent in by Helen from Fernville Fields, and this next picture, as you can see, has been sent in by Lauren from Leeds. All the way back in the 13th century, it was just a small borough, Leeds was. Then in the 16th century, a market town. And by 1760s, it had developed carbonated water. So as we push through to the next few days, let's find out exactly what's happening. Unfortunately, it is becoming a little bit more unsettled. Now, I'll add on the isobars and the frontal systems. This bank of rain is really slow moving. It's going to give us a fair few deposits of water, I should say. Expect a fairly soggy night, and it lasts into Thursday as well. Towards the far north, we could see some sleet showers, but as that system passes us by, the winds do come up at a fairly brisk pace. Now, the temperatures you see on this screen are early minimum temperatures. I think by the time we wake up, we'll see temperatures around 7 to 9 degrees. But we do wake up tomorrow morning, bit of a cloudy, murky, damp start. We never really lose those rain showers, and the odd one is going to be on the sharp side. We may, if we're fairly lucky, just start seeing some bright skies coming through. Another breezy day, temperatures above the average for the time of year. Let's take a quick snapshot on Friday. After cloud disappears, it's going to be a day of sunshine and showers, and in the sunshine, we really can't argue with temperatures in the mid-teens. I'm going to show you the summary, and like I say, it's turning milder as we head to the end of the week.
TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
I'm exhausted after that.
I hope we enjoy the weather as much as he seemed to enjoy forecasting it. He was having a great time there. James Webster will be back with an update after news at 10. Geraint Vincent has the national and international news coming up next. But from Ian and myself, goodbye.
Thanks for watching. Good night.